My name is Dana Verstegen, and I'm the host for today's session. During the next hour, you will hear from ARIS CTO Z. Hossain and ARIS Business Development Executive John Bean. Together, these two have more years in the M2M industry than I'm sure they want to count. They can answer any questions that you might have related to asset tracking or the M2M industry and technology in general. We'll do a Q&A at the end of the presentations. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box in the lower right corner of your screen. After this session, you'll receive a copy of the slides and a recording of the session. So, no further ado, let me turn it over to Z.
Thank you, Dana. Let's get started and talk about what M2M cellular connectivity is all about and how it impacts the bottom line on asset tracking. But before I dive into those details, a little bit about who we are, who the company is, what we do, etc. We have been a pioneer in the M2M Internet of Things IoT space for more than 19 years at this point. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley, California, and we've been offering services since the mid-1990s. Our solutions are basically an optimized machine-to-machine IoT platform all the way from connectivity to the application enablement. So everything in between, whether you're transmitting from a device out in the field, receiving it inside the network, or analyzing the data on the other end for an application of some sort to analyze that data and perform some business decision, we provide that. Recently, we introduced our NEO system for enabling rapid M2M deployment, not only for developers, but also for people transitioning over to us to get their existing applications operational quickly. Our customers are typically enterprises who are deploying machine applications, M2M applications, or IoT applications of any kind. We started out with connectivity to and from the devices to support these kinds of applications, and have recently, about a year and a half ago, deployed the analytics engines that allow people to make business decisions more quickly. Rather than having to develop the solutions themselves, they can get information and content analysis from us. What are the numbers associated with ARIS? Well, we have an infrastructure that's highly reliable. When you have a machine that needs to communicate, you need to have a network that gets the job done reliably all the time. So we have a highly reliable infrastructure internal to ARIS, and then, of course, the cellular systems externally are generally kept in very good operational condition by all the various operators and carriers who are our partners in this endeavor. We're currently operating in about 190 plus countries. In terms of the numbers of devices we have out in the field, we're the third largest cellular M2M IoT data services provider in the United States, 9th globally, and are currently serving about 250 million messages per day, which is a significant number of transmissions, as you can imagine, from an M2M IoT perspective. The kind of markets we serve, 6 areas that we focus on, ranging from healthcare, telematics, consumer auto, monitoring and control, point of sale, and utilities. And these applications send and receive data through our entire platform as a single point of connectivity. Whether it's business or technical or support relationships, you do not have to worry about which carrier you're operating on or where in the country you might be and where in the world you might be. We provide the complete solution, end-to-end, including support. So we have, if you look at the center box, we have the data and voice connectivity on the bottom, ranging into device and IP session control information that customers might want, going into automated provisioning and activation systems, providing the real-time information for alerts and alarms, doing the billing and reporting functions that our systems will gather information about to provide bills, and complete account-level NOC support with engineers who understand that the application is going to be an M2M device and not a cellular handset, and therefore will be able to provide support geared towards the kind of applications that people are using on our network. And then, of course, on the top, you have the connectivity enablement, which is device management functions, etc., and the application enablement, which is the content analysis to get going quickly and rapidly to get your application deployed in the field. From a cellular perspective, we have global services, over 500 carriers operating within our domain. And of course, very importantly, we offer 2G and 3G CDMA cellular as well as GSM cellular, somewhat unique in that regard. And of course, are deploying our 4G LTE network for those customers who are going to want to have higher data performance and or service longevity in the long run for the future. That's in a nutshell the markets and services we provide. The technology that enables that capability is something we call the ARIS M2M platform. On the bottom, you see the AirConnect system, the cellular connectivity services, which is supporting all the technologies. Just above that on the left is our complete core optimized network. And that's a very important distinction between us and some of the other providers is because we actually own and operate all the infrastructure equipment within our data centers to provide these data transports for machine-to-machine and Internet of Things applications. And the reason that's important is because we can optimize a solution for M2M rather than relying on what might just be a standard cellular service from a typical operator or carrier around the world. Airport allows our customers to manage the devices either through an API or through the airport portal, which you'll see a demo of very briefly at the end of this webinar presented by John. And that data then feeds into the application enablement platform, which we call AirCloud, that goes into the applications, the green boxes at the top, that the customers are deploying out in the field. On the right-hand side, you see the billing and operational systems for all of the various business models, the flexible business models that are not absolutely needed for large-scale deployment, unlike a typical handset customer who might only have one or two or a handful of devices for their family. Typically, our customers are larger enterprises that have thousands to hundreds of thousands of devices that they need to have consistent billing, consistent and flexible billing for their particular operational requirements. So let's define asset tracking. Let's dive right in. I want to make sure that people understand what we're talking about here. We're talking about objects which are either in motion or could be put into motion, meaning they need to be located. These motions, this movement, the tracking of that movement of these physical assets is what asset tracking is all about. It's not people tracking, it's not pet tracking, those have different feature requirements typically. It's not the vehicle telematics, those have very unique application requirements for consumers. This is physical asset tracking that is designed for a particular or for a general business purpose, such as improving efficiencies, for example, doing stock and inventory management inside a retail operation. And also, when you have this kind of a business purpose where you're going to provide an asset tracking solution, you're going to end up with generally better customer support. You can provide a good solution, notify your customers as and when needed about what is happening to their particular orders, etc. So this kind of asset tracking application is sort of fundamental to a lot of things that you might see happening in the industry today and has been going on for a number of years. And finally, asset tracking may also be used to solve a specific problem, a little bit more specific from the perspective of, let's say, controlling the assets that leave the location they're supposed to be in, or maybe are being stolen and no one is monitoring them. So the idea there is to be able to provide tracking for the kinds of devices, for the kind of units that are in some kind of inventory somewhere that need to be tracked. And of course, the ability perhaps somebody else might decide they want to be able to do just-in-time delivery for cost efficiency reasons. They might want to be able to make sure they can use their capitalized cost and infrastructure equipment, whatever they might be doing, for example, rental fleet, more effectively and efficiently. So now there are a large range of applications which have very specific requirements in some cases, but one can generalize some typical use cases here. I can't go into every single possibility of what applications are being used for asset tracking or what products are being tracked, but I can give you some idea of what people might be doing over here. Inventory management is a classic. It's the one that's been around perhaps the longest, not only in the machine-to-machine and IoT space, but in the retail space prior to that. So the knowledge of what is available and where it is available and how you can use it, that's very important. Being able to predictively identify an asset that could be used or retargeted for different purposes. You need to know where it is. You need to be able to track it. So if you have a just-in-time scenario where you want to be able to move the rental equipment or move some heavy capital equipment somewhere where it needs to be located, that is an inventory management process in general where asset tracking can be very important. And of course, people are now applying predictive analytics to decide where some of those equipments are accessible and where they need to be used for those applications. Another example might be a business challenge. I sort of gave you one example already, but let's say you have an in-field query. Some customer needs to know that they need to find a particular pump for a repair. Where is that asset located? Where is the nearest asset located? Where is the nearest compressor located, perhaps, so that they can go retrieve it and perhaps solve a problem for a customer. You're basically maximizing the utilization of the available assets. And of course, these kinds of applications need a large range of solutions. You may have large-scale deployments that need very low-cost solutions, and I'll touch on that a little bit in a few seconds. And of course, one of the solutions that might occur is that even if you have large-scale deployments and you can't afford to spend money tracking each specific unit, a particular application may have an indirect solution, whereas perhaps you can track the container or a trailer which is shipping those units rather than the individual units themselves. And as long as you can indirectly relate the location of that specific unit to a container or a factory location or even a shelf somewhere that says that's where it is, that's an application that is a part of it, falls under the umbrella of asset tracking. What are the common characteristics? Well, obviously, assets that are being tracked are usually in motion or will be in motion. Therefore, fundamental location is essential. This is kind of obvious, I suppose, but really you need to know where your location is, whether it's local inside a building, inside a facility, inside a factory, or remote, is distributed, widely being deployed out in the field for whatever purpose it might be used for. Generally speaking, the remote applications need accuracy, so they tend to use GPS systems. Even if you're in a metro area where you think you might have sufficient granularity, often you need specific locations down to a certain level, and GPS is the best way to get that. Assets that are being tracked sometimes need to have bidirectional data transports, meaning you need to know the condition of the asset. You need to get information from the asset. You need to know where it is. How available is it? Is it already being used? And some other information perhaps about the asset as to whether it's suitable for the application that you're deploying that asset for. Often you need to send the information to the assets to trigger a report. Where are you? To shut it down, perhaps to redeploy it, change the unit's behavior or configuration of how often it reports, etc. Now, fundamentally, as I mentioned earlier, location is important, but just to reiterate that point, assets are in motion. Assets being tracked are in motion. They may be inside a building, they may be in shipping, they may be in transit through some facility, they may be in a manufacturing floor, they may be in a retail sales inventory situation. And of course, outside typically tends to be rentals, equipment, heavy-duty equipment, could be on-site sent out to a customer, or it could be in the distribution chain somewhere. You need to locate it, figure out where it is, and understand what you can use it for, what you can do with it, etc. So what are the technologies that are being used? Now, there's a broad range of capabilities, some of which are applicable to the webinar, some of which are not. And I want to touch base on some of those items as well. For example, you might have a passive method, and usually the large-scale systems, large-scale solutions need ultra-low cost. So they typically tend to use either RFID or they might have a barcode, and more recently the new phenomenon of QR codes. So you can get information about the asset that you're trying to track on an as-needed basis. The important point about these technologies is that they're either short-range or don't do any transmission at all. Like you have to actively read them with some kind of a sensor or scanner. And so the management of these assets, if you will, tracking these assets, is a post-scan management process. You may be using a scanner to go locate all the inventory on your shelves. Maybe when the equipment is, when the item is shipped, and again, this is a large-scale situation. When the item is shipped, it passes by a scanner, so it's sent to the correct destination. High-volume shippers of large quantities of different kinds of items, such as you might see from one of these larger internet retailers or e-tailers, if you will. That is where some solutions like this make a lot of sense, particularly in large inventory and stocking locations. Clearly, the important point over here is that with a passive system like that, you don't have any active query. You can't go look unless someone is sent out to the scanner or understands ahead of time where the item might be located. And next, you have the active tracking solutions when typically the assets are in motion quite often, and you need to have an alert. If you need to know where that remote asset is, if it's outside the boundaries of your location, that's when typically you require a cellular solution because it is a natural long-range wireless technology. Typically, when you have a very high-value asset and you want to have real-time long-range query capability, that's when, again, cellular plays a very distinct and key role in helping you provide asset tracking solutions to those kinds of assets. And of course, these two capabilities encompass a wide range of solutions. You might have a one-time use, maybe a discardable passive short-range system, or you might have a very active, reusable bidirectional data system like the cellular systems provide. An example of a discardable solution, which I thought was pretty cute when I saw it years ago, was a little glass enclosed G sensor that could be attached to sensitive products which are monitored during shipment. when they arrived at the facility, if the glass was broken, you knew it had been subjected to more shock than it should have. That's an example of a passive, very short range in the sense that it didn't even transmit. You had to sort of actively take a look at it to see whether something had occurred. An example of a long-range data is longer-range data, which is reusable, is a device installed on a railroad car, which monitors where that railroad car is going, where it's being shipped, and the equipment that, the items that are on it, the assets that are on it that are being tracked. So you can have a range of solutions, and of course, cellular works well for certain systems and not necessarily for all asset tracking applications. So let me touch on that a little bit and about what cellular can provide for you. But first, what is cellular? What are the today's cellular M2M deployments that are being done? Typically, in the M2M and IoT space for asset tracking that are regional M2M deployments, you can use either a 2G CDMA solution or a 2G GSM solution. That is a very typical, commonly used technology today. And in metropolitan areas, the coverage in general is very, very good. If you have a national application, particularly if you're doing long-range tracking on a highway somewhere or in a rural area where the coverage of CDMA is better, you will definitely see more CDMA usage than GSM. In general, CDMA was deployed more effectively by the carriers deploying CDMA from a coverage perspective, and therefore long-range tracking requirements became CDMA solutions in general. Later on, when GSM came along, 2G GSM expanded later on, the fact that it had a lower radio cost allowed some people to deploy 2G GSM, but the majority of the longer range applications tend still to be CDMA. Other comments I might make about cellular is when you're using that for an application, if you have a GSM solution, you're going to need to deal with more than just the device or the asset. You have to worry about SIM management, physical management of the SIMs, whether you're deploying it. And of course, if you're using a SIM, you may need to deal with a SIM swap if you need to change carriers or operators. In the CDMA side, the information is all on the radio. Generally speaking, those are programmed either at the factory when you first start out, using what I call a tethered solution, i.e. a connected wired solution, or an OTA change later on. And of course, it is much more amenable to carrier swaps because the technologies being deployed at CDMA are being used by all the carriers. It's a matter of programming the application and the carriers it sees and finds over the air perhaps later on. What is happening for the technology in the future? There are a number of factors that can be used to determine which technology is best for your asset tracking application, assuming you're doing a cellular solution. First thing to keep in mind is that there is a 2G GSM GPR sunset going on in North America, in the United States in particular. And that migration away from 2G GSM is going to need to happen by January 2017. Clearly, the 2G CDMA folks have a lot more time available to them because the technology is available for more than that time period. And we're seeing a lot of people migrating from 2G GSM solutions to 2G CDMA solutions for asset tracking applications and redeploying their units back out in the field by changing on the design or changing on the radio module to run on our network. Something to keep in mind is that 4G multi-technology, 4G fallback to 3G and 2G can be complicated, and that has slightly hindered the deployment of these devices out in the field, although the third bullet point, which I'll get to in a second, is perhaps more of a factor than not. 4G fallback to 3G EVDO or 2G CDMA is a little bit more complex. You're dealing with different technologies, different identifiers in the network, and therefore people need to understand what it takes to get those kinds of applications deployed. Module prices in 4G LTE have been fairly high. They're dropping steadily, indeed faster than earlier technologies, but still significantly higher than the 2G CDMA or the 2G GSM solutions that are available today. Clearly, there's a trend towards what are called LTE-only modules. That will happen. It is happening. It's getting out there, being deployed, and once that happens, the price will drop further, and you'll see a quicker change to using 4G technologies probably by the 2018 timeframe. Before that, the radio module prices, coverage, and other factors related to LTE deployment probably will hold it back, except for people who just absolutely have to have it for longevity purposes or for the high throughput that LTE can provide. So what's the bottom line? I mean, let's talk about what it takes to deploy a cellular application and why you might want to deploy a cellular application. In some cases, it is vital. Some of the applications you cannot do without cellular. If you have a distributed asset, if you have a remote asset, you have to have some kind of long-range wireless area network or, wide area network solution. And when you have a wireless solution like cellular, it serves the application well. On-demand, bidirectional, data transmission, asset tracking for locations is best served by cellular when you have cellular coverage. In certain cases, which is extremely rare, when the asset may be located beyond cellular coverage, you might need to have either a satellite solution or a hybrid satellite cellular solution. The cost of services for cellular is surprisingly low compared to the asset value. That will drive selection of cellular often. So if the cost of the asset is high, like you're tracking a highway road building equipment or a farm combine, or you're trying to locate a rental of a bulldozer out in the field, that often justifies having a real-time tracking capability where cellular serves well. If you do have units that are lower cost where an individual cellular solution for every unit might not be practical, people have done tracking solutions for the containers of those devices. A simplistic example that I can remember from a number of years ago, one of our customers was shipping in long-haul trucks cigarettes. Now, I'm not going to condone smoking, etc., but the fact is cigarettes are expensive. And so each individual pack might not be that bad, but a trailer full of cigarettes can be a very high value asset. And if you track the container, the trailer itself, you're going to get a better outcome than not having any tracking at all. Now, an important point about using cellular for asset tracking is that you have to control your costs because you're generally going to be doing this for a large number of units. You have to optimize your plan. You have to optimize the usage of the data available in that plan. So a service provider who can provide a custom rate plan like we do for our customers is essential. You want to maximize your usage of what you're paying for. You might want to do pooling. Some applications you might have lower transmission requirements on a monthly basis than other applications, and therefore pooling of the available data across those devices and across the rate plans is essential. That gives you the most optimal usage and cost controls associated with your application in those asset tracking applications. And of course, very important, usage alerts and automated device control is very essential to making sure that your costs don't run away on you. So if you get an alert that tells you a device is perhaps using more than it should, and then you can make either a objective business decision or maybe even set an automated business rule that says that the device needs to not be allowed to transmit any further, is a good requirement for cost control, which is clearly enabled by cellular systems where people provide that kind of solution. And John's going to give you some examples of that, of what kind of alerts that you can set within our system that will allow you to do an application that allows you to manage your costs more effectively. So let me give you a final thought and some summary information. Basically, the asset tracking applications that are being deployed today can indeed provide effective solutions for you. But you have to calculate the return on the investment for that application. Clearly, for any high value or remote asset tracking application where you use cellular, the justification, the ROI on that is easy. People are doing this all the time, and it's a growing industry, a rapidly growing industry. If you can relate the cost of the tracking system to the value of the asset and clearly make a business decision that says you got to do it, that's when you decide that cellular may well work for you, particularly if it's a remote device. Another recommendation that I generally make to people is to keep the solution simple. Less complex solutions work more reliably, and reliability is essential because it's not like you can afford to just track a sampling of your assets. You really want to know where everything is. And the more reliable systems you do, the less complex systems you do, the better off you are in that regard. And so selecting an experienced cellular provider who knows about machines is essential to reducing your cost of risk. And of course, cellular is being used for a class of asset tracking applications for many of them. Not all, absolutely. If you have a retail management solution where RFID or a barcode or a scanner works for you, fine. But for certain applications, cellular is absolutely essential. For example, remote assets absolutely need to have long-range technology of some sort or the other, and cellular is a natural choice because of the reliability, the real-time latency, and what the costs can be for the kind of assets that you need to track. So in a word, or in a slide, that sort of summarizes all the thoughts about maintaining costs and using cellular for remote asset tracking. I hope in a good way for most of the people who are doing it.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Dee. I really appreciate that. A reminder to our listeners that if you want to ask a question, you can use the chat box in the lower right corner of your screen. And I want to turn it over now to John Bean. And he will go through Airport and talk more about the specifics of how, for your asset tracking solution, we can help impact your bottom line. So, John, let me hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dana, and thank you, Z. Just in summary, as Z mentioned, asset tracking has a lot of unique requirements, different from some of our other customers. And one of the ways is that, often asset tracking devices they're battery powered as opposed to being hardwired. They're designed to report, maybe just once or twice per day, or only if an exception has occurred. They need reliable, quick connections with very low latency in order to optimize battery life, because often these asset tracking systems are deployed for 4 or 5 years, maybe even more. And sometimes they're fixed. And as he mentioned, sometimes they can be mobile. So being able to have ways to troubleshoot devices remotely, anything to prevent a truck roll and having to go out and touch the devices are key. So what I'm going to try to focus on today is just kind of differentiating a number of ways that ARIS is able to offer a lower cost, higher quality service for anyone deploying asset tracking devices on our network. One of the ways we're able to do that is by custom designing rate plans that are going to optimize our customer supply chains. One of the ways that we do that is we allow our customers to provision devices, on our network, which means they're fully active. They've got, phone numbers, static IP addresses. They're able to test, all of these devices either during the manufacturing process or, when they're testing them before shipping to customers. They're able to do all this in a non-billable state. We allow our customers, we provide an allowance of data, voice, SMS for them to test with, and only when that amount of data, voice, or SMS is exceeded does that trigger, cause it to go into a billable state. So for a lot of our customers, they're able to, go off and build, thousands of devices and not actually see an invoice for ARIS until that device is installed, generating revenue, in the field for them. That's just one of the, unique ways we're able to lower customers' costs and design, rate plans to meet their supply chain. Obviously, at some point in time, they may have to suspend a device. We have a lot of customers that are seasonal, whether it's school buses in the summer, or snowplows in the winter, agricultural type solutions that aren't being used. So we do allow customers to suspend devices in order to avoid any type of monthly usage fees. And then they can automatically come out of suspend again when those triggers are exceeded. So this is just one of the ways that we're able to design rate plans, for our customers that meet their requirements. And then actually, when the device, if it ever comes out of the field, needs to be repurposed, it can start this life cycle all over again. So what I'd like to do next is actually show you in the next 10 minutes a brief overview of Airport, which is our enablement platform. This is where you provision devices, report on devices, troubleshoot devices. It's where all the monthly billing and usage reports are posted to. And anything I do and show you today in Airport, you can also accomplish with our APIs. We have a full suite of APIs that we provide to customers for no cost. So what I'm going to focus on, I've always showed you how we can design rate plans to meet your supply chains. I want to show you some of the troubleshooting capabilities in Airport, which are, because we own and operate our own mobile core network, we have a lot more visibility into the usage, into the behavior and control of devices than you might be accustomed to if you're using any type of an MVNO solution. So I'll show a little bit of troubleshooting and how we can prevent truck rolls, eliminate a lot of issues with devices without having to open trouble tickets, wait for carriers to respond for 24 hours and things like that. And then I also want to show you how we can mitigate any risk to overage, unintended usage, with real-time alerts and thresholds. As a carrier, we have real-time visibility into the usage of devices. We see all the traffic as it flows through our network. So we're able to set real-time alerts. And we can actually have alerts that take corrective action through thresholds, or what we call traffic policies. So, oftentimes fixed asset, type devices, the usage is very consistent. They report X number of times per day, so many times per month. the usage is very consistent. So you're able to set alerts maybe at 10–15% higher than that usage, just to make you aware of any devices that may have a bad firmware download, gone rogue, or might be consuming more data, SMS or voice than you're accustomed to, and you might want to be aware of. So if we have any alerts, they're going to be triggered in our dashboard, and the dashboard is designed to give you kind of a 30,000-foot view of any devices in your environment and your account that might need attention. I'm in a test account now, and I've got a number of just test alerts basically that we've set up. And if I click on any of these alerts, it's going to show me the specific devices that have generated these alerts. And then if I want to drill down and look at any one, click on it, and it's going to take me to the bottom half of the screen, which is really, it's kind of the secret sauce of ARIS is having this real-time visibility into these devices, and to be able to diagnose them and tell if they're on our network, if they're in a network, if they've been registered on the network, if they're in an active packet session, transmitting data. Obviously, this device that I selected is not, but I can look at the last time it was registered on the network. And if it had been registered on the network, I can actually clear the registration, which is like kicking it off the network, doing kind of a soft reboot. Oftentimes, this solves a lot of problems with devices. It forces them to re-register, reset themselves, and establish a new connection. I can also ping devices, which is going to let me know that everything's okay with that device. I can ping it. If it's up and running, it's going to send me an active IP address. It's going to eliminate the fact that there's not any issues with tower connections, batteries, devices, and things like that. I can also send SMS commands to a device. Oftentimes, our customers troubleshoot devices remotely by sending SMS and T-type commands to devices to have them report more often, change the reporting frequency, and things like that. I can do all that from within the dashboard or using our APIs. I can also, see the last, 100 transactions for this device. I'm really trying to determine what the monthly usage profile is, daily usage profile, and things like that. So we give you a lot of visibility and ability to solve a lot of problems with devices without having to contact support, open trouble tickets, contact operators, and things like that. Should I need to, request assistance from ARIS, I can also just create a trouble ticket by clicking here, and it'll bring all the content specifics for that device into this ticket, and then I can just, open up a trouble ticket where later under the support tab, I can, look at the history of tickets, and find out if they've been, if they're open, closed, in status, whatever. When the provisioning tab is where we design, custom rate plans based upon your specific monthly usage requirements. We have all kinds of plans, as he mentioned. We have pooled plans. We have high usage rate plans. We have per megabyte plans that are just pay per use. We're able to basically create any type of rate plan that our customers need, and then also allow them to have a certain amount of data and SMS for them to test with in order to make sure that when they ship devices to customers, they're working, they're active, and they only go into a billable state when they're deployed, generating revenue. We have the ability to activate, 1 or up to 10,000 devices at a time. We can do bulk uploads and bulk activations. We can have different rate plans for different devices based on different reporting frequencies, usage requirements. Many of our customers have multiple rate plans because they've got, maybe fixed assets that are moving and reporting every 5 minutes, and then they've got other type of asset tracking devices that might report once a day or only when an exception has occurred. We also provide a lot of custom fields as well as some predefined fields where if you want to store information about that device, who it belongs to, firmware version, device version, anything like that, we allow you to store all that information into the device. And that can be added during activation, or we can add it later in the Devices tab. I mentioned, one of the other ways that we control costs for customers is and lower their cost is with real-time alerts and thresholds. This account has a lot of alerts. Basically, add an alert, simple as just giving it a name, providing a description. We have alerts based on the entire account, a specific rate plan, a group of specific devices, or we have something called a report group, which can represent, one customer, one reseller, one distributor. We basically can create alerts any way that you like. The important thing is that we have alerts for packet data, SMS, voice. We can actually set alerts to show you when a device, registers on the network for the first time. The time period for alerts, we can set alerts, daily alerts, hourly alerts, or even month to date. Most of my customers, I encourage them to set month-to-date alerts. If they have a device that reports once a day, it might be 1 kilobyte per day. That's 30 kilobytes per month. I would encourage them to set a report for maybe 40 kilobytes per month, so as to eliminate any noise that might occur, any exceptions that might go off. So we can have an alert that goes off at 40 kilobytes per month, and then as a precaution, I might set up another alert maybe at 50 kilobytes per month for that customer, month to date. And what I can do with that alert is I can actually apply a traffic policy, which basically says at 40 KB, give me a warning, but then at 50 kilobytes month to date for any device I've assigned this alert to, block data to that device. And I can block all data, voice, SMS, or I can just block data. And what this does, if any of you have been in this business as long as I have, I'm sure you've had these conversations about overage and devices that have gone out of control. We can basically prevent any risk or exposure to any device consuming more data that you've intended for, to alleviate any bill shock at the end of the month where you see a device is going rogue. And we can do that by our traffic policies. And again, these take automatic corrective action. And I can set them up daily, month-to-date, hourly, and we can have multiple alerts for an account. If that alert I just created has been triggered, it would appear again in the dashboard, and in parentheses it includes the devices, the number of devices where that alert has maybe triggered. Once these have been triggered, we post them to the dashboard within 5 to 10 minutes. And once an hour, we send out emails. We do a sweep. We send out an email to notify you, hey, you might want to look at this device or this group of devices. This alert has been exceeded. So those are 3 of the ways that we're able to increase the bottom line for our customers in asset tracking. Just in summary, by creating custom rate plans that meet their supply chain requirements. Number 2 is by better troubleshooting, allowing them to resolve problems and issues, without having to get carrier intervention and open up trouble tickets. And number 3 is by setting alerts and thresholds that are going to trigger and prevent our customers from having any type of exposure to any unwanted or unintended usage. So that's kind of just a high-level view of of Airport. Everything that I've shown you, I can do with APIs. We've got complete online documentation that's updated very frequently. We've got learning modules. We also, in the portal, we have reports. We post all of the invoices, the detailed usage reports down to the device level. We actually have more detailed reports to show every transaction for a device. One of the nice things is we show you how many devices you have that have been provisioned. And remember, anything that's provisioned is not billable. Only after it exceeds that trigger does it transition to a billable state. So for this account, you can actually see how they had 402 devices. In January, 308 were billable, and then they added 3 more devices, and so they have 3 more billable devices. The provision devices decreased by 1. So this kind of gives you a picture of how many devices you have out there, maybe in your sales channel with distributors, resellers that have been unsold but aren't costing you money because you're not paying any recurring monthly fees until they actually surpass the triggers that we've set and transition to billable. So that's kind of the 30,000-foot view. I'd be glad to, if anybody would like a a deeper dive into the portal, we'd be glad to set that up. With that, I'd like to turn this back over to Dana for questions and answers.
Excellent. Thanks, John. I really appreciate it. We've had a few questions. Let's just jump right in. So the first one says, we have AT&T right now and are having to update all of our sites from 2G GSM. And we're really struggling with whether to go to 3G or just move right to LTE. So maybe I could send this one to you, Z.
Okay.
They're asking for any advice you might have.
Okay. The problem, unfortunately, is that there is no simple, single answer to this. I hate to use the word "it depends," the phrase "it depends," but it does. It depends on what you're doing with that application, what your needs are, what your price sensitivity to a 4G LTE radio module might be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, we have a lot more detail in both a white paper and a webinar that is on our website. So if you want to get more detail after you've heard my responses, you can go look at those pieces of information as well. Basically, most customers have a choice. They can switch their devices away from AT&T onto another carrier, like us through, like T-Mobile through Aris. But it does involve a SIM swap. So you have to go out there, and if you have access to the SIM, you're going to need to touch the device, and that can make it happen. It's not as easy to replace. You effectively cannot move an M2M SIM away from AT&T. You'd have to change the unit out. That's a common practice. More often than not, people who are changing the device will have price concerns about 3G, whether it's HSPA or 4G LTE, which is even higher, because the radio module prices are higher. So we're seeing many customers, I think I mentioned this briefly in my webinar, many customers actually moving to 2G CDMA as an interim step. Clearly that has a longevity that is beyond 2G GSM today, and ultimately in time it will also migrate, but it gives you a longer runway to get your products moved over to a technology that can be used effectively today with as good coverage, and the radio module prices are simply not as expensive as a 4G LTE module might be, so you can do a 2G CDMA solution. On the other hand, if you don't want to touch the device again, ever, for the next 5, 10, 15 years, then maybe a 4G LTE solution is warranted, even if the cost of the radio module might be cost prohibitive for some people. This is a tricky issue. Migration of technologies once you've already deployed it out in the field is a problem that's going to occur, and I highly recommend you go look at our white paper and the webinar that we've posted to make a determination as to what's more effective for you.
So I see here that they're kind of talking about trying to make a decision between 3G and LTE.
Right.
Can you give us a sense of what kind of percentage difference are we talking about between 3G and 4G?
Okay, well let's look at it this way. If you look at 3G, whether it's HSP or EVDO, the radio costs are approximately 3 to 5 times more expensive than a GSM or a GPRS radio,
wow,
and probably on the order of about 50% more expensive than a CDMA 1X radio, in that ballpark. LTE is still 5 to 10 times more expensive than GSM, GPRS, and maybe 3 to 5 times more expensive than a 3G solution. So that kind of dictates the amount of capital and time and effort you might want to put into a solution, because if the product gets expensive, you have to deal with that today. So like I'd recommended, I think that when you see LTE-only radios starting to happen in the next 2 to 4 years, that's when it makes a lot of sense. If you can wait that long, it makes a lot of sense to go to 4G LTE. The question then becomes, should you go to a 3G solution today or not? If you can hold off by going to a 2G CDMA solution, you're going to get lower cost today, and that gives you a little bit more timeline, a little bit more time. The next change you'll have to do will be to 4G LTE, and you can do that on a time frame without having to be rushed about it. That would be the key reason. In the alarm and security industry in particular, this has been a big issue in the past 2 years when the announcement was made that 2G GSM would shut down, because they are one of the most prolific number of devices, most heavy users of the 2G GSM solution, and they're all migrating to a combination of 3G, 2G CDMA, and very little 4G LTE, because the price is simply too much for them.
Let me ask you one more thing about this, because obviously people who are doing asset tracking are all over the place. So I'm curious about coverage.
Yeah.
How would you compare the coverage maps for 3G versus LTE? And I'm thinking in particular about remote locations.
Very good point. Let me touch it from the following perspective. 2G CDMA has the best coverage in the US today, for example. 2G GSM is almost as good, but overseas, obviously, 2G GSM has got the best coverage. But within North America, 2G is probably the best coverage today. When you start looking at 3G coverage, if you look at a 3G CDMA solution like EVDO, it's excellent coverage. It's almost as good as the 1X 2G CDMA coverage. On the other hand, 3G HSPA is limited to probably from a physical perspective about 40%, from a people perspective somewhere in the 75% of the 2G coverage. And that's a hand wave, to be honest with you, because it's not perfect. That data is not perfect. But on the other hand, 3G isn't as fully covered across everybody as you would like it to be, particularly if you're looking at an HSPA solution. 4G LTE is still getting there. Everyone says that their coverage is excellent and they're covering all the people, et cetera, but practical reality says there's still markets where they have not yet fully deployed 4G. What's an interesting difference, though, is that the 3G HSPA markets have not changed coverage quite as much in the past 2 to 3 years as 4G LTE, because everyone wants to get to the next technology. So all the capital spending by the carriers and operators is all in the 4G arena. 3G is not getting the kind of attention it might need because they all want to get to 4G regardless.
Yeah. So in other words, LTE is building up
LTE is
faster,
building up.
but maybe not quite there yet.
Not quite there yet, and as I said, the radio cost is a deterrent. Right. But by the time the radio costs come down, the coverage will probably be there within the next 2 to 4 years, so people can start making effective decisions about new application deployments at that time.
And so my understanding in terms of LTE is that urban areas are going to be very solid now, but still more difficult in the more remote locations.
And surprisingly enough, even the urban areas today where you think you have LTE coverage, most carriers don't.
I discover that sometimes, yes.
Reality and what is expected is not always consistent.
Right. Let me ask you one more question. I know we're running out of time here, but someone asked an intriguing question about monetizing data. And this is something, if you're reading an M2M and IoT right now, everyone's talking about the data and big data and what more you can do with your data and what are the new revenue opportunities. And that's basically what they're asking here. And I can imagine in asset tracking there might be a lot of opportunities for it. So just some thoughts, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot with this one, but they're saying, we're looking for new ways to monetize our data. What kinds of things have your other asset tracking customers done?
Yeah, this is still I will call it an evolving area. People recognize that it isn't just the data itself being sent from one application for a specific customer, a specific need. That application, that data can often be used in other ways, where a combination of 2 or 3 different types of information, location, whether the asset is working properly, etc., can be combined in ways that has more value than just the initial application in the first place. There are pros and cons and issues that concern that. One is that the data might not be yours. It might belong to somebody else, and you've got to think about negotiating the appropriate agreements to allow usage of that data, perhaps for another purpose. And that's good, but it needs to be done. Another point might be that a customer who has provided that data will want anonymity, security issues being taken care of, privacy issues being taken care of. If the asset that's being tracked, and this could be applied to any M2M application, I suppose, but if the asset is being tracked is something that they want to be careful about, that it doesn't get stolen or reported in places where people who shouldn't have access to that information get access, that there's some kind of controls and security principles applied to how that data is made available. So I think it's an evolving area. I don't know of anybody who has spent time in taking their asset tracking data today and providing it in some ways beyond the application that they originally intended in the first place, but I can absolutely see it happening. There are, in fact, a number of people who are looking at what it takes to make that happen from a data mart perspective, a data market perspective, being able to sell their data as long as that information doesn't violate regulations that might be coming down the pike.
Right. It's an interesting topic. I mean, we should dig into it and get some, put together a thought piece for our website.
You bet.
Yeah, I think growing interest in that. John, how did we do? Did we miss anything? Any further comments?
No, I think you've pretty much covered it.
Okay, good, good. Well, I want to thank all of you so much for being here with us today. As I said at the top of the call, we will send you a copy of the slides as well as the recorded session. And do feel free to get in touch with us at any time at 188-GO-ARIS, or you can write to us at info@aris.net. Have a great day, and thanks again. Bye-bye.